Our journey begins with a woman named Hannah, whose soul was filled with sorrow. Married to Elkanah, a devout man from the tribe of Ephraim, Hannah endured the torment of being unable to have children. At that time, being childless was considered a great burden, and for her, it was even more painful because Peninnah, Elkanah's other wife, had many children and constantly mocked her for her barrenness. Hannah felt lonely, humiliated, and abandoned. The weight of her sadness was overwhelming. On one of the annual trips to the tabernacle in Shiloh, where the people worshiped God, she made a decision that would change the course of her life and the history of Israel forever. While everyone was engaged in the sacrifice, Hannah, with her heart crushed by anguish, went to the temple to make a desperate prayer to the Lord. With tears streaming down her face and her words barely audible, Hannah made a bold promise to God, "O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look upon the affliction of your servant, and remember me and give me a son, I will dedicate him to you for all the days of his life, and no razor shall ever touch his head." She promised that if the Lord gave her a son, she would consecrate him as a Nazirite, a servant of God dedicated from birth. The priest Eli, who was watching Hannah from afar, noticed her lips moving but without sound, assuming she was drunk. He regretted his judgment when Hannah, with a pure heart, explained that she was in deep prayer. Understanding the sincerity of the woman, Eli blessed her, saying that God would answer her plea. Sometime later, as a direct answer to Hannah's prayer, God granted her the desire of her heart, and she conceived a son. Samuel was born as the fruit of unwavering faith and fervent prayer. His name meant "heard by God," because he was living proof that the Lord hears the pleas of the afflicted. The dedication of Samuel to the Lord. When Samuel was weaned, Hannah, faithful to her word, took him to the temple and gave him to the priest Eli to be raised in the service of the Lord. Imagine the moment, Hannah, with tears of both joy and sorrow, fulfilling her promise as she gave her beloved son away, knowing he would grow up far from her but under God's protection. The farewell was an act of deep faith, and once again, Hannah prayed, thanking God for the grace she had received. Samuel, even as a young child, began serving in the tabernacle. He learned the rituals, prayers, and sacred service from an early age, and the Lord was with him in everything he did. He was different from other children. His presence in the tabernacle already indicated that God had a greater purpose for his life, the divine calling. One night, when Samuel was still a boy, something extraordinary happened. While sleeping in the temple, near the Ark of the Covenant, he heard a voice calling his name, "Samuel, Samuel." Without hesitation, he ran to Eli, thinking the priest had called him. But Eli, still confused, said he hadn't called and told Samuel to go back to sleep. This happened 2 more times until Eli realized it was God himself who was calling Samuel. Then he gave Samuel a precious instruction: "If he calls you again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" When the Lord called again, Samuel responded as instructed, and thus began God's direct communication with the young boy, revealing that he would bring judgment upon Eli's household because of the sins of his corrupt sons, Hophni and Phinehas. The next day, Eli asked Samuel to share everything the Lord had said. Although young Samuel was hesitant, he faithfully told Eli the entire truth. Eli, in his wisdom, accepted the divine verdict, knowing that the Lord's word would prevail. As Samuel grew, it became evident to all of Israel that God was with him. None of his words fell to the ground, and the Lord continued to speak through him. Samuel became a prophet and judge in Israel, respected throughout the nation. His spiritual leadership was crucial during a time of spiritual decline and foreign oppression. The Philistines, Israel's relentless enemies, oppressed the nation, and the people were lost. But Samuel, with his spirit of leadership and deep faith in God, led the people back to true worship. He exhorted the Israelites to abandon their idols and serve only the Lord. Under Samuel's leadership, Israel won a decisive victory against the Philistines at Mizpah, and the people recognized that it was God who gave them the victory. As a symbol of this deliverance, Samuel raised a memorial stone and called it Ebenezer, which means, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." It was a marker that, through submission to the Lord, the people had moved from defeat to victory, marking the beginning of the monarchy. However, as the years passed, the Israelites began to demand a king for themselves. Like the nations around them, they wanted to be ruled by a monarch instead of relying on God's direct leadership through his prophets. Samuel was deeply saddened, but God instructed him to grant the people's request, explaining that the rejection was not against Samuel but against the Lord himself. Despite this, Samuel warned the people about the dangers and sacrifices that would come with the monarchy, but they were determined. So, following divine instruction, Samuel anointed Saul as the first king of Israel. Saul, a tall man with an impressive appearance, initially seemed like the ideal leader. He had a promising start but soon strayed from the path of obedience. When Saul directly disobeyed God's orders, Samuel, with a heavy heart, announced that Saul's reign would be taken away and given to another. The anointing of David. In a secret mission, Samuel was sent to the house of Jesse, where he found the young shepherd David, the youngest and most unlikely candidate for the throne. Under God's direction, Samuel anointed David as the future king of Israel, marking the beginning of a new era for the nation. The legacy of Samuel. Samuel spent the last years of his life in Ramah, his hometown, where he led the school of prophets. His life was marked by unconditional faithfulness to God, and his legacy as a prophet, judge, and spiritual leader remained intact until the end. When Samuel passed away, all of Israel mourned his death. He was buried in Ramah, and his memory was revered for generations. Even after his death, Samuel's spiritual authority was so great that Saul, in desperation, attempted to consult him through a medium, seeking guidance to face the Philistines. Samuel was one of the greatest prophets of Israel, a man who remained faithful to the Lord in times of crisis. He not only prepared the way for the monarchy but also served as the bridge between the time of the judges and the reign of David. His example of steadfast obedience continues to inspire generations, and his story is a powerful reminder of what God can do in the lives of those who trust entirely in him. If you were touched by this story of faith, subscribe to the channel and share this message, so that more hearts may be strengthened by his grace.